Chapter 63. Kill them all. Ignorant brat, the camp leader, who was dressed in a golden robe, had an extremely ugly expression. No matter what, he never expected that his men would be unable to take down this kid. This was especially so considering that he had boasted earlier that he would take care of it in the time it took for an incense stick to burn. Now, the time it took for an incense stick to burn had indeed arrived, but the one who was taken care of was his guard. A bunch of trash. A cold glint flashed in the camp leader's eyes. He stepped out of the gate and walked towards Xu Qing. As he moved forward, the spirit energy fluctuations outside his body grew increasingly intense and an astonishing amount of Chan blood burst forth from his body. His body under his robe swelled up, making his figure look like a mountain. There was even a faint golden light that spread out from his entire body. The camp leader was also a body refiner. However, it was obvious that the cultivation technique he cultivated wasn't a low-level technique like the mountains and seas art. It was an ultimate technique from the diamond sect, the diamond technique. At this moment, under full circulation, his aura erupted and his footsteps instantly sped up. He transformed into a giant shadow and charged towards Xu Qing. His speed was extremely fast and he arrived in front of Xu Qing in the blink of an eye. He directly punched out, and as he swung his fist, his entire body emitted a dazzling golden light that was filled with pressure. Xu Qing swept a glance at the old man in brocade robes and Captain Lei, who was standing at the threshold and observing the situation. He suppressed his anxiety and narrowed his eyes slightly. He was very clear that once he gained the upper hand, the other party would very likely threaten him with Captain Lei. This was something Xu Qing didn't wish to see. The only way to prevent this from happening was to act too suddenly, to be so sudden that the other party couldn't react in time. Hence, Xu Qing narrowed his eyes and similarly punched out, colliding directly with the camp leader. With a loud boom, Xu Qing's body staggered back 7 to 8 steps. However, he didn't move in a straight line but moved a few steps to the side. At this moment, the sunlight was behind him, reflecting the shadow on the ground. It also swayed as he moved. During the collision between the camp leader and Xu Qing, he could feel the power coming from Xu Qing. At this moment, his entire body trembled and he similarly retreated. However, when he lifted his head, a look of disdain appeared in his eyes. With a sway of his body, he charged towards Xu Qing once again. The cultivation base in his body circulated fully, forming a rumbling sound. His tone was disdainful and his gaze was filled with superiority. However, when he attacked, he went all out. What he revealed on the surface was intentional. After all, to be able to become the camp leader and make a group of scavengers feel fear, he couldn't be underestimated although he was a sect member. Diamond First Art, the camp leader let out a low roar. As he spoke, his body swelled up once more and his strength and speed soared explosively. In the blink of an eye, he arrived before smashing down ruthlessly. Xu Qing lowered his head, causing the camp leader to be unable to see his eyes. After that, he lifted his hands and blocked the attack fiercely. With a boom, he retreated once again, and the swaying of his shadow became a little more intense as he moved. However, no one discovered it. Diamond Second Art, seeing that Xu Qing had actually withstood 2 of his attacks, the camp leader, whose cultivation had reached the peak of the 8th level of Che condensation, felt even more murderous. His body expanded once again as he threw another punch at Xu Qing. The golden light that erupted from this punch was even stronger. However, the instant it landed, Xu Qing abruptly lifted his head. The killing intent in his eyes erupted intensely at this moment. The location he moved to many times finally caused his shadow to face the old man in the brocade robe at the entrance. With the help of movement, he concealed the distortion he created when controlling the shadow. As for the sun in the sky, due to the angle, its shadow was elongated at this moment and it arrived not far in front of the brocade robe old man. As Xu Qing lifted his head, killing intent erupted from his body. He ignored the camp leader's fist and leapt up abruptly. The instant he ascended, his shadow also abruptly crossed the distance between him and the old man. Amidst the distortion, a portion of the shadow abruptly extended out and directly covered the right wrist of the old man who was holding Captain Lei. 1. Xu Qing's figure didn't fall behind at all on Captain Lei. This was also another important reason why he adjusted his pace earlier. In an instant, as Xu Qing let out a low roar, the shadow's strange power suddenly erupted. In that instant, the old man's expression changed. Intense pain and the eruption of anomalous substances caused his right hand to turn greenish-black. This sudden change caused him to instinctively release his grip on Captain Lei's body. The instant he let go, Xu Qing's entire body let out a rumbling sound. He endured the impact of the camp leader's punch and spurted out fresh blood as his speed completely erupted. His entire person transformed into an off-dream image and directly disappeared from his original location, rushing toward the old man in the brocade robe. There was also an iron stick and a dagger that transformed into two streaks of cold light that were as fast as lightning. They whistled as they approached the old man in the brocade robe, forcing him, who was in the midst of having his right hand mutated, to retreat and dodge. As he dodged, Xu Qing rushed in and directly grabbed a hold of Captain Lei. He threw him out forcefully and Cross and Lu One-Tooth's figures quickly leapt out from the crowd. They caught it and quickly retreated. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. It was incomparably fast. Your shadow. The expression of the old man in the brocade robe changed as he abruptly looked at Xu Qing. Everything that happened earlier was too sudden and unexpected. He couldn't react at all. The camp leader's eyes narrowed at this moment as well. Xu Qing's series of actions truly shocked him. Xu Qing wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and stared coldly at the two of them. Under the setting sun, his figure was like a falcon as he spoke in a low voice. Now, it's my turn. As soon as he finished speaking, his body shot toward the old man in the brocade robe with a bang. Compared to body refinement, Xu Qing felt that the first person he wanted to kill should be someone who cultivated the Tao. At that moment, he charged out and instantly got close. The expression of the old man in the brocade robe was extremely ugly. He quickly retreated and performed a double-handed incantation gesture, pointing at Xu Qing. Immediately, fog rapidly condensed and transformed into the shadow of an evil ghost, charging ferociously towards Xu Qing. The camp leader also let out a low roar. His entire body erupted with golden light as he charged towards Xu Qing with a boom. Together with the old man's attack, they formed a pincer attack. Upon seeing the danger, Xu Qing's eyes gleamed coldly. At that moment, all the blood and qi in his body erupted. Amidst the rumbling, the power of his vital energy and blood swept out in all directions like a storm. A gigantic Kui shadow materialized ferociously, letting out a soundless roar that shook the surroundings. Xu Qing raised both his hands and clenched them into fists at the same time. One on the left and one on the right. They landed simultaneously. When they landed, the shadow behind him split into two and pounced toward the camp leader and the old man in the brocade robe at the same time. Blood-chet shadow formation. This. The camp leader's expression completely changed. After his fist came into contact with Xu Qing's left hand, the golden light on his body instantly dimmed under Kui Shadow's sinister smile. His entire body then violently retreated by 70 to 80 feet. As for the old man in the brocade robe, he also had a look of horror on his face. The evil ghost that transformed from his spell was trembling in front of the Kui Shadow. After the ghost was devoured by the Kui Shadow with a sinister smile, the Kui Shadow didn't stop and charged straight at the old man. An explosive sound echoed in all directions and the old man in the brocade robe coughed up blood as he rapidly retreated. However, at that moment, a blue barrier of light appeared around his body, causing him to only vomit blood. His injuries weren't too serious. The source of the light barrier was a talisman. This was a talisman treasure. Xu Qing's countenance was also pale. Although he was strong, when faced with the camp leader and this old man's pincer attack, his internal organs were also churning. At that moment, fresh blood flowed out, but his viciousness didn't reduce in the slightest. Taking advantage of the camp leader being intimidated, Xu Qing's eyes erupted with killing intent as he charged toward the old man in brocade robes. He punched with all his might. "You're courting death." The old man's countenance was pale and his eyes revealed a sinister glint. As he retreated, he maintained the protection of the talisman treasure. At the same time, he performed a series of hand seals with both hands and fiercely waved them. Immediately, 7 to 8 evil ghosts appear. Each of them was comparable to the 7th level of Qi condensation. They let out cold roars as they attempted to devour Xu Qing. A ruthless glint flashed in Xu Qing's eyes. He didn't dodge and allowed the evil ghosts to pounce over and tear at his body. His speed didn't decrease and his aura didn't weaken at all as he punched out. Amidst the rumbling, the talisman treasure's defense trembled. However, This item was a talisman treasure after all. Unless it was completely exhausted, it would be very difficult to destroy it. However, it was obvious that even this old man would find it difficult to obtain a second talisman treasure. Moreover, this talisman treasure had been used countless times and the words on it had become much dimmer and blurry. At that moment, under Xu Qing's bombardment, it was speeding up and becoming blurry. This caused the old man's expression to change drastically again. He could sense Xu Qing's ruthlessness and knew that he was in a life and death crisis. Hence, there was also madness in his eyes. He performed a series of hand seals and spat out a mouthful of blood, turning into a blood shadow that whistled sharply as it approached Xu Qing. However, at that moment, the blood and qi in Xu Qing's body were surging. He couldn't be bothered with the other party's spell at all. He risked being injured and threw out another punch. Captain Lei is already in his twilight years, but you still won't let him off. Xu Qing's eyes were red. At this moment, the Kui shadow roared at the sky and fused with his fist before smashing down. Although the talisman treasure could resist it, the violent tremor still caused the old man in the brocade robe, whose foundation had once collapsed, to cough up blood. His body retreated abruptly and the madness in his eyes turned into panic. A feeling of impending death caused him to let out a sharp cry. Zhang Shiyuan, what are you waiting for? Continue attacking with me. Zhang Shiyuan was the camp leader's name. When he heard this from afar, he suppressed the shock in his heart and rushed over. At that moment, there was also a bloody hole in Xu Qing's stomach where the blood shadow had pierced through. However, Xu Qing no longer cared about the intense pain. The blood and qi in his entire body erupted once again, and the anger and madness in his heart reached their limits. Captain Lei has already chosen to dodge, but you still want to pester him. Captain Lei's life has been miserable, yet you still want to be ruthless. Xu Qing seemed to have gone mad as he threw out punches after punches. The Kui shadow roared at the sky and coordinated with his punches to continuously land on the old man's defense. The rumbling sounds echoed throughout the entire campsite. The words on the talisman treasure became increasingly blurry, but it still didn't shatter. However, the old man in the brocade robe couldn't withstand the tremors from Xu Qing's strength anymore. Waves of indescribable terror rose in his heart and the feeling of death grew even more intense. His talisman treasure had miraculous effects on spells, but against the resonance force formed by the bombardment of body refinement. His body, which had once had its foundation destroyed, couldn't last for too long. As the old man continuously spat out mouthfuls of blood, he was filled with anxiety and despair. He wanted to shout for help, but the assault of the resonance spread through his entire body, causing him to be unable to make a sound. Amidst his horror, his entire body trembled to the extreme. He was also unable to cast any spells due to the tremors and could only howl miserably in his heart. I don't want to die, At the next instant, the veins on Xu Qing's forehead throbbed and his eyes turned red. He clenched his hands together and smashed them fiercely against the talisman treasure's protective barrier. Die. An intense and astonishing power erupted. The talisman treasure's defense distorted, but it still didn't collapse. However, the old man's body trembled intensely and his eyes bulged. At that moment, his body could no longer withstand the continuous tremors. His eyes instantly exploded and his internal organs collapsed. His flesh, blood, and bones directly shattered, turning into minced meat that became a blur. After doing all this, Xu Qing panicked and turned his head abruptly. His right hand punched out and collided with the camp leader, who was rushing over from behind. His injured body was instantly sent flying back by 70 to 80 feet. Many wounds on his body that had mostly healed opened up once again, and fresh blood filled the air. At that moment, Xu Qing was covered in blood under the setting sun. As for the camp leader, his heart was also trembling intensely. He looked at his partner, who had been blasted to pieces, and then at Xu Qing, whose body was covered in blood but was still crouching there, maintaining his attacking stance. Xu Qing's gaze revealed killing intent as he stared fixedly at him, and he felt a chill run down his spine. This scene also caused the scavengers in the surroundings to be shocked to the extreme. When they looked at Xu Qing, they revealed astonishment and reverence.